Just a quick note before we get started. On episode 68, yours truly, your humble narrator, deviates from the normal format just a bit. We have a little section of thank yous and a very special merch giveaway and a deeply rooted, heartfelt dedication that takes place in the beginning of this particular episode. If you're the type of listener that likes to get right to the conversation, I totally get it. If that's you, jump to about 30 minutes in. And now, on with the show.
Who that?
Coming up on episode 68 of the Upful Life podcast.
And they come walking up to me, and I'm like trying to break down my gear, and they're like, "Boy," I'm like, "Oh shit," because I mean, I got a lot of shit when I first started painting. I got, you know. Anyway, so he's like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh shit," and he's like, "You know what you're doing?" And I'm like, I look at Scully. I'm like, I'm painting the show, you know. And he's like, "Ha!" And he elbows Walter, and he goes, "He's doing it, and he don't even know he's doing it." And I'm like, "What the fuck am I doing?" He goes, "Boy, you're doing acousti-optics." And I'm like, "What? Fuck did you just say?" And he's like, "Acousti-optics." And I'm like, right away it made sense to me. I'm like, acousti-optics. My head went bam. And he goes, "Boy, that's the relationship between sound waves and color waves and how they come through your brain and out your soul." And I was like, "Ma." I was like, my life has changed forever. You know, I was like, I finally know what I've been doing for the last couple of years because I felt it. I just didn't know.
I'm a bozo. Oh, yeah, I thought you had it. You recognize it.
I love you very much.
Many people like him.
Where all the noise goes.
Let's make a toast forever and ever. Let's make a toast forever and ever.
Yes, indeedy. Dearly beloveds, welcome to the Upful Life podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and this is episode number 68, coming to you live and direct from the Vibe Junkie studio in Oakland, California. 68, sliding in a little late, but let me tell y'all, this one's an all-timer. So grateful you are tuning in. Yes, indeed. Episode 68 of the Upful Life podcast is stoked to let y'all know about Secret Dreams Music and Arts Festival in Legend Valley, Thornville, Ohio, August 17 through 19. Big fan of this lineup. I gotta say, this came across my desk a few months ago. I randomly met one of the cats behind the fest at Red Rocks last year for lettuce, and unfortunately didn't make it out last year, but I'm angling to hit it this year because the lineup is bananas. I'll give you just the headliners and a few of my personal faves. We've got Grizz, Tipper and Tipper and Friends Takeover, Sector 9, 2 sets, Detox Unit, 2 sets, Of the Trees, 2 sets, and of course my boys, Lettuce, one set, but you know it's going to be fire as fuck. And a number of my other faves in the mix. Break Science, Goop Steppa, Yeti, Matty O'Neill, Cursa. We got the new Random Rabbit Lapa project called Das, or Dads on Stage, Duffrey, my boys in La Special, Fela, Karina Reichman, who I'm talking to tomorrow morning for the pod, round 2. You heard it here first. We got the All Low crew, the All Low collective out of Denver. My new faves, like Feel, who you're hearing in the background right now. We got Thought Process, Park Breezy. We got the Morning Coffee collab between these cats. We got Dillard, and the list goes on. Pre-party, Wednesday night lab group, La Special, 5 a.m. trio. Y'all know what it is. The experience is a fresh and immersive festival focusing on both visual and performance arts. This is their second year in this location at the esteemed Legend Valley in Thornville, Ohio. Second annual Secret Dreams Music and Arts Festival, August 17 through 19. It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 3 unique stages, late night performances, yoga workshops, live painters, artist collaborations, interactive installations, and a whole lot more. Check it out, secretdreamsfest.com. Shout out to my man, Rob Chafin. I'm going to do my best to make it out to this, what looks to be an absolutely incredible festival experience. Secret Dreams, y'all.
When I wake up in the morning, love, the sunlight hurts my eyes. Something without warning, love, is heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you, I know it's gonna be a lovely day. Lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face.
Yes, indeedy. Neil Francis and Nigel Hall, Lovely Day. Cinco de Mayo 2023 at Chiquiwawa in New Orleans this past Jazz Fest. It's going to be a very NOLA-centric episode of the Upful Life podcast. But before we get into the festivities, I want to thank everybody who's been tuning in, leaving reviews, ratings, donating, etc. It's been really, really heart-filling and empowering, and the sincerest gratitude, the deepest of bows. You can, of course, leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcast or your platform of choice. It goes a long way in steering those pesky algorithms in this direction, lining up new listeners, new ears, new souls for the Upful Life podcast, and we appreciate that. Of course, you can hit me up directly, b.gets@upfullife.com. Send me an email, because I love to hear from the people. If you got suggestions or recommendations or constructive criticisms or partnerships, collaborations, I want to hear about it. b.gets@upfullife.com. At the very least, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, please smash that subscribe button on your podcast platform or listening service. You can also follow Upful Life on Instagram at Upful_life, and of course on Facebook.com/UpfulLife. And if you're so inclined and want to support the endeavors of all things Upful Life, you can go to upfullife.com. There's a support button on top, and you can send me a couple dollars for making you holla. I love when I get paid for doing the wild thing. Speaking of upfullife.com, You can certainly check in on what I've been up to the last 5 weeks or so since we last spoke. I was back east, lending a hand and assistance to my mom's recovery from the broken hip and the surgery. I know I told you about that last month. And a small silver lining was I got to check out Lettuce, the fiery 4-night run at Blue Note, New York, with Buckshot from Black Moon, members of Brand Nubian, Mike Stern from Miles Davis's band. You can read all about that on Live for Live Music or upfullife.com. Same for Sharky Puppy. Yep, you heard that right. Snarky Puppy and Isaiah Sharkey came together at Stern Grove, San Francisco, right when I got back to the Bay Area. Wrote that one up for Live for Live Music, and you can also find it on upfullife.com. And same situation for Ascension Maintained. Erykah Badu and Yasin Bey slay the East Bay on the Unfollow Me tour. That's my piece on Live for Live Music. Again, also found on upfullife.com. And there's a preview for the Blue Note Jazz Festival Napa Year 2. It's coming right up in just a couple weeks. Unbelievable lineup. We got a sick crew coming together. My man Randy from Funkit Blog, my lovely wife, my homegirl AJ. We're pulling a Voltron, and we're going to swarm like Wu-Tang on the Blue Note Napa. But you can read my preview on Live for Live Music, of course. I want to thank everybody who tunes into the pod, who reads my work, who interacts and engages on social. Honestly, it's like a battery in my back to keep going, and I give thanks. Here's a little bit more of Neil and Nigel. Well. A couple of first-time situations here on the Upful Life podcast. I want to start with something super fun and super righteous, and that's we're doing a giveaway. We're going to do a series of giveaways over some of the next few episodes because we have a very benevolent listener, friend, member of the old school Let Fam, Let Army, my man Joe W. You might remember Satori Movement, classic clothing line and lifestyle brand from many moons ago, but this is my dude, and he made limited edition Lettuce fan apparel. Super dope. You may have seen me or my wife or select random Let soldiers rocking the Lettuce Praise t-shirt or hoodie. And you got that right. My man has blessed us up with just a few to give away in association with the Upful Life podcast. That was like warmed my heart like a motherfucker. And he brought it to me and said, hey man, let's do this. We do, hint, hint, we do have some lettuce pods on the way, but I just couldn't wait. I got a painting with lettuce on it on the wall, and that's relative to this podcast that's coming. And I just couldn't wait to give something away. So being that it's summertime, we'll go with the t-shirt. I've got a large and a small. So depending on who wins, you get a large or a small. And if you're bigger than that, then probably have to wait for a hoodie, which will be coming soon. How do you win this? Well, I really want to do it randomly and fairly, so we're going to do like just everybody's names in a hat and shake it up. But how do you get your name in the hat? One of two ways. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, specifically. Preferably a favorable one, but I want you to keep it a buck. And then screenshot that to me and send it to b.gets@upfullife.com. That's one way to get in. The other way to get in is just to send me an email and tell me something specific that you loved about a particular episode of this pod. Doesn't matter when. Can go back to the very beginning with Mikey Karuba, all the way up to episode 68. Anything you love, just let me know some nugget and write me an email, and that'll get you entered. And from there, we'll let you know who wins. I'm going to do this for the next few episodes, and if anybody out there wants to get involved in stuff like this and promote your wares or just bless up the community through giveaways that help get the podcast more out and about or more engagement or whatever it is, I'm all ears. I love to hear it. The fact that my man Joe came to me with this was pretty sweet. So while we're on giving thanks and the reciprocal energy of the Upful Life podcast, I've never done this before either. We never did a giveaway, and I never shouted out listeners or supporters before, but I've gotten some donations. I've gotten some other kinds of support, whether it be professional or just empowering words or, intangibles. I want to shout out some specific folks, some listeners out there. We're going to start in the city of New Orleans, appropriately enough, with my man Larry and my man Ira and my man Donald. Those three cats, independent of one another, have done wonderful things behind the scenes to support the Upful Life in general. Upful Life podcast, Upful Life in print, and my work. So I want to, and there are many more in that city, and I'm not going to name them all in one episode, but we're going to start shouting out the listeners that are really, getting behind what I'm doing. And in the great state of Florida, or should I say the state of Florida, it's a great state. My wife is from there, and we have dear friends from there, and Swanee goes down there, but we all know what's happening in Florida. Almost my heart aches for good people in Florida like my man Steven, and down there in Miami and South Florida, Aaron. Two huge supporters of all things Upful Life, regular listeners of the pod, engaging on social, so that and kicking down a few dollars, whatever it is. I appreciate y'all. Same for Lisa in Virginia. Lisa is a huge soldier. She's a general in the Let Army for the Virginia area. I would say like the DMV. She's running things down there, and she's a huge supporter of this pod and all things Upful Life. So I see you, Lisa, and also Robert in Minnesota. Robert is actually a professional podcast producer, unrelated to anything I do. Invaluable resource for me on a lot of levels with this thing of ours, La Cosa Nostra. So, yeah, those are the thank yous for episode 68. That was Master Blaster, the final night, final song of Let Us Steal Pulse tour. Stevie Wonder cover, one of my favorite songs of all time. So we're giving away a Let Us Praise, Let Us t-shirt from my man Joe. Y'all know what to do. Let's get into episode 68.
You're going to lie up yourself and don't be no drag. You lie up yourself when you get some little bag, yo. You lie up yourself and you don't say no. You're going to lie up yourself. Lord have mercy.
Oh, yeah. I'm digging deep into my meters bag for this one, fam. I was just thinking about, I had Neil and Nigel singing Lovely Day, and they both came on the pod, and it was such an honor to tell their stories. And today, no, I'm not having any of the meters on, but I'm having something definitively New Orleans. And and close to my heart and something dear to me and so many others around the country and around the world. So naturally I had to get into the meters bag deep. And, I love when Cyril brings the Irie vibes, the reggae energy, the percussion. That's my meters sweet spot. But nonetheless, it is my honor and privilege and an absolute thrill to welcome to episode 68 of the Upful Life podcast, the one and only Frenchy, artist extraordinaire. I mean, he's like in the pantheon of one-word names, with like Prince and Madonna and Cher. I mean, you can say Frenchy and people know exactly what fucking time it is. So I'm going to give you a quick 411 for those who I doubt there's very many folks listening right now who are totally in the dark as to who the hell Frenchy is, but I'm going to read a couple paragraphs from his bio at FrenchyLive.com. Frenchy paints with soul and celebration as he travels the world capturing live performances, music, festivals, fundraisers, and sporting events with style and finesse. From his palette comes vibrantly colored brushstrokes inspired by rhythms and melodies, giving emotions a shape in real time. His vivid, energetic pieces captivate art collectors, sports fans, and music lovers alike, as if they had the best seat in the house. Based in the talent-rich city of New Orleans, Frenchy is an ambassador to the arts and a bastion of creativity. No lies detected. Who is Frenchy? Born to a boxer and a saint on August 16, 1970 in the industrial New England town of Lowell, Mass., Randy Leo Frechette, a.k.a. Frenchy, has been drawing since he could grip a pencil. In grade school, he impressed friends with caricatures of teachers and classmates, but he did not realize his true calling until the Boston Horns approached him in Orlando, Florida, and persuaded him to paint their performance live in '94. And since then, Frenchy's presence has filled venues both large and small with an explosion of creative spirit. Now, I'm not going to read his whole bio because I've learned through this pod that the guest inevitably tells their life story in much more colorful and personal detail, so I'm not going to get into all that. You're going to hear an incredibly human, beautiful, inspirational story, narrative, journey from the man's lips in his own uniquely New England and Bayou dialect, which is fucking epic. But I do want to just let you know why this is so special to me, aside from the fact that this guy is a New Orleans legend and a pioneer of live painting for music and that whole culture and diaspora that has sprawled out of what he began, and he'll tell you all about it. Aside from that, y'all know I've been going to Jazz Fest since 2000, save for a few years, this or that. It's my 19th year, just passed. And my first Jazz Fest, I went down there and visited one of my homies growing up, this dude named Andrew Laganella. We refer to him as Lag. And he went down from Haddonfield, New Jersey to Loyola in New Orleans for college. So he was our guy down there when we came for Jazz Fest in 2000. He plugged us in. We stayed with him. We met his friends. And we ran around as if we were, tagging along with Lag. And that entailed meeting a number of interesting characters. One of them was a fellow named Brandon Tarracone of the Brotherhood of Grooves, still a dear friend. And it was through Lag and Brandon that Frenchy came into my whole world, because he was still, this is 2000, he's been there a couple years, he had a thing going, but he was not, the one-word name omnipresent cat yet. But he did amazing work back then from Jump, and Brandon's own band had their own Frenchy painting, and among many others that I saw back then. So I've been paying attention to this dude since then, and unfortunately Lag and their friend Jacques, who I was also friendly with down there, an older cat who kind of showed us the ropes around town, both Lag and Jacques have passed on in the interim 2 decades. So I want to dedicate this pod with Frenchy to both of those guys, especially my guy Lag, because Lag was like this little 5'3", just explosive ball of human energy, good, bad, ugly, crazy, caring, loving, he was all the things, and he was a year older than me, maybe one grade. But I looked up to him, even though I looked down at him in a lot of ways. And he was our entree to New Orleans and everything that came after that. So I think of him often. So I wanted to just kind of toast Lag with this Frenchy episode. And Jacques, too. We used to go over to, there was a duplex, and they were brothers, Jacques and Tony. And they one lived upstairs, one lived downstairs, and they couldn't be more different cats. And we spent a bunch of time, 2000, 2001, maybe even 2002, over that duplex after some wild nights. And I used to stare at this photograph on the wall at Lag's and at Jacques, which was of those two guys and Frenchy and cowboy Bob Weir. And you'll hear me reference that photograph in the pod. So I'm going to maybe put that up on Instagram or link it in the show notes or something. But you'll be able to see it through something Upful Life in the coming days. So that was the beginnings. And I've been a fan of Frenchy's work, seeing him on ESPN painting NFL stuff, all the way up through, the folks that founded Live for Live Music, Kunj and Sarah, when they had their insanely epic wedding in New Orleans. Frenchy painted the whole day, multiple scenes. And most recently, my lovely wife Alicia and myself were on the receiving end of a truly just otherworldly gift, which you may have seen me post the other day. And I'm not going to put the friends specifically on blast publicly because, it's a private thing. But some dear friends got us Frenchy painting lettuce at Tipitina's in New Orleans this past November of 22, which my brand new bride and I, 1 week to the day from our wedding, got to enjoy lettuce in the hallowed Tipitina's, and now that hangs on our wall. So I've been staring at that for a few months now, and finally got the cojones to ask for an interview. I got so carried away telling that story that the music went away for a second. I guess you had to flip the tape back in those days. Remember that? This is the meters from October 5th, 75, Jackson, Mississippi, that you're listening to. And as I was saying, shout out to my dear friends who blessed us up with this amazing painting of my favorite band and dear friends in the one and only Tipitina's Uptown. So that's why, in a nutshell, this conversation you're about to hear is so dear to me personally, because it frames my, love and adoration, passion, support, everything that I feel for the city of New Orleans. Like, that is what's behind this conversation from a personal standpoint. And then from a journalistic standpoint, this is, Frenchy hasn't done a whole lot of pods, if any. I don't think I've listened to any. I've read him quoted and interviewed in print media, and he's a fucking celebrity, so it's not like he hasn't talked to the press. That said, I just kind of was nervous as fuck for the first 5 or 10, and he's a cool-ass dude, and that went away real quick. And then he did most of the talking, which is so awesome. I didn't have to say a whole lot. My man just fucking dove in and spun yarns and took us inside so many trials, tribulations, travels, journeys, adventures, and of course his time through substance abuse into recovery, which is a part of the story that we talked about in detail at the end of our conversation. And it's an essential part of this dialogue is that part towards the end. And I told one story off the air that I just wanted to relay, which was that this dude made me feel like the baddest, coolest motherfucker one time. When we were down there for Kunj and Sarah's wedding, and I insisted that my future in-laws, Alicia's mother and stepfather, join us at Jockey Mo's for dinner. I mean, all my years going down there, just like, this is my spot to eat, fam. And we were having an awesome dinner, and we spilled out into Oak Street, and we were peering into a closed Frenchy gallery through the glass. Now, mind you, I had been in this gallery numerous times, of course. One time that comes to mind was like at 6 or 7 in the morning, coming out of the Maple Leaf, spun on a head full, walked right in, and there was Adam Deitch playing like a grand piano in Frenchy's art gallery, like at dawn. for like 6 people. It was so fucking incredible. So anyway, same gallery, and we're peering in the windows, and Frenchy's like coming out maybe from the apartment or side door, whatever it was, and he notices us and he says, "Oh, you want to come in?" "Hey man," gives me a pound, as if we're super homies, but I'm sure he didn't remember me for nothing, and invited me and Alicia and her folks in and gave us like a 20-minute private tour, this whole shebang. And man, did that make me look cool. Matter of fact, the next morning at Elizabeth's Bywater, when Alicia excused herself to the bathroom, I asked her mom if I could propose that weekend at Halloween, and y'all know how that went. So I know I just went on for a while, but I really just kind of had to tell those stories. It's my podcast, so hope you enjoyed it. And just so you know, if you want to avoid this shit, you can go into the show notes and I tell you when the interview starts. And that's right the fuck right now. So we're about to dive in with the one and only Frenchy on episode 68 of the Upful Life podcast. And if you didn't know already, I'm your host, B. Getz. Yes, indeedy. Let's do this.
People say, people say.
All right, all right. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Frenchy, painter, located in New Orleans, a living legend. I just gave him like a 3-minute introduction, so the listeners know a little bit about you if they didn't already, and I'd be shocked if the majority are not well familiar with your prestigious career and influence. And I've been a fan of yours for 21 years. I just counted when I was doing my prep.
Wow.
I got it. And when I say it's an honor and a privilege, I really fucking mean it. So welcome to the Upful Life podcast.
Well, thank you, brother. Really appreciate that, man. Really excited to be on the show. Let's get going, man. What's going on? How you doing?
Man, I'm chilling. I'm out here in Oakland. We've got the last Dead and Company shows here this weekend. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of buzz. And yeah, I've just been waiting to talk to you. So, for probably since I started the pod, but realistically, the past couple of years, I've always kind of had in the back of my mind that I want the world to know Frenchy's story. So that's what I'm trying to do here today, is just kind of take people through the journey of you personally, artistically, professionally, spiritually, if we go there, whatever, man. But I like to start in the now, and then we jump in the Wayback Machine. So
Cool.
What's going on in the life of Frenchy right now, summer 23, New Orleans?
Well, I'm just I'll be 53 in August, so slow down a little bit. I have a 11-year-old son. I'm married to my wife Tina, and we have an 11-year-old son. His name's Leo, and I spend a lot of time at home. I have a home studio, and I just, I've been pretty much a homebody. I've been having a lot of commissions and whatnot, but I get out. My gallery is only 3 doors down from the Maple Leaf, so I have that. I'm incredibly grateful and super blessed to live the life that I live. I guess out of everything I've ever created, I guess my journey has been my best work of art. I think all for the good and the bad. Can't have one without the other. But at the end of the day, just today before we got onto the podcast, I just moved my studio from my home back into my Oak Street studio, which is, much bigger than my carport back at home. But I'm feeling a bit nostalgic today. So it's kind of cool that we're on this podcast together. Just really excited to be back on Oak Street painting and looking forward. I'm painting Pete Moreno tonight and Louis Michaud. And then tomorrow night, painting the Dirty Dozen Brass Band at the Maple Leaf. So got it rocking out. There's no shortage of loud music over here in New Orleans land. You know what I mean?
Yeah, ain't that the truth? And nobody knows it quite like you do. And it's, those are two really definitively New Orleans shows too, right there with the Dozen and Pete. So even in the middle of summer, still the music is as hot as the air is down there.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's pretty awesome, man. And I told you off air, I've been to your studio numerous times, and I was going to ask this question a little later, but since you brought up the studio itself, I understand like earlier in your career, you try to go down on Royal Street for a few years,
Yeah.
and which is kind of a different scene. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's markedly different than Uptown and Oak Street. So
Oh yeah.
tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
I just turned 30. And what's crazy, man, is I always wanted, it's when you get to, that's your goal, is like to have a gallery at French Quarter, or never mind on Royal Street, right? So we were just, back then I was just turning 30. I was painting every night of the week. We were going we were just, we were going all around the world, really. And was able to save up some money, and didn't have any credit, right? So we find this spot on Royal Street, 300 block, right across the street from the police station. And so I go to I figure out who's leasing it, and it's this lady by the name of Ruth Ann Menutez, and her sons Dimitri and Paul handled her real estate for her. Anyways, I get these guys. I go to these guys, and they're like, "What you want it?" And I'm like, "Don't even bother running a credit report, man." And they're like, "What you can't expect to rent a $12,000 a month studio with no credit, And I was like, "Well, I got some cash, I can give you guys a sizable deposit." And anyways, long story short, my lawyer knew their mother, and that was a big help. And eventually I signed a 3-year lease to this gallery on Royal Street, but we were supposed to sign it on 9/11, man. Swear to God. And then it was on Monday. And so 9/11 happens, and my silent investor, was in New York, and he was supposed to fly in. So he ends up renting a car. He was like one of the last people to drive out of the city. And he came straight to New Orleans. All my friends, all my family telling me I shouldn't sign a 3-year lease to the French Quarter because they just closed all the airports and all the conventions canceled overnight. And I was like, everybody is like running from retail. And I was like, you know what, man, there's no effing way that I'm going to let this take my dream away. And, I don't care if I lose my ass. I'm going to we're going to have a live music acousti-optics gallery at the 300 block of Royal Street. And we're going to rock out all the local music and all the jam music. And it was, there's no stopping me. So I went ahead and did it. Those guys were nice enough to let me have that lease. And we had a blast. I had live music, 7 days a week if I could. A lot of piano players, like a couple of guys that have passed away, like Willie Metcalf. Marcel Richardson, and of course there was like Joe Crown and John Grow, and and what was really cool being on Royal Street, like sometimes Alan Toussaint would be walking by and come in and play the piano. This one time after Jazz Fest, Alan comes into I wasn't there, I was upstairs sleeping. I slept in late back then. And because I had a couple of condos above the gallery. It was crazy. Anyways, so apparently Alan comes in and sits down at the piano. He's playing piano, and then he looks over and he notices a painting of him that I just did at Jazz Fest on the wall. So without stopping playing piano, he asked my girl, how much the painting was. He buys the painting, pulls cash out of his pocket, still playing piano, buys the painting, and played for like another hour, and then grabbed his painting and rolled out. And I thought, I was like, man, that's so cool.
Anywhere I go, something goes along with me. It's the charm of the city, hey, 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 the Crescent City in me. It's a New Orleans thing. It's a New Orleans thing. It doesn't leave you just because you leave town. No, no.
But I would do, we do Frenchy's First Fridays, because, you know, I'm an outside artist. You know, I never went to school, self-taught. And, you know, my whole deal is I'd rather have, because every Saturday, the first Saturday of the month, they'd have the big artwork for all the fancy galleries, right? So I do Frenchy's First Fridays. And then that way I could go on the art walk if I wanted to. But and there's no competition on Friday night, right? But and if it was crawfish season, we were boiling crawfish in the back. My boy Jamie Galloway, rest in peace. He used to boil up our crawfish for us every time. But I mean, we'd have like George Porter, Papa Goes Funk, and you know, Rebirth, and James Andrews, and 12 and I, James Andrews and I, we were really close when I first moved to New Orleans. And he vouched for me. He when I got my in 1998, I got my Jackson Square license to display my art and paint. And I used to set up behind the brass band. And back then it was Tuba Fats, Glenn and James Andrews, right? Shorty was like in not even a junior high yet. And he was still shorter than his trombone back then. And so I mean, it was an amazing time. I was really blessed. You know, when I first moved to New Orleans, I painted at a lot of the. I just was addicted to brass bands. And I would go wherever there was brass. And there was a bar called Donna's on Rampart, and Mr. Charlie and Miss Donna, and they would let me paint there. And I'd have to set up with my third leg of the easel in the window, and the easel on top of the table. And it was like the old McDonald booths, and I'd stand in the chair and I'd paint from that position. And like, you know, Bob French, and a lot of Kermit Ruffins, Derek Freeman also vouched for me when I first moved to New Orleans. Derek and 12, those guys vouched for like Tuba Fats and those guys on Jackson Square. They wouldn't just let anybody. They was, you know, if you just watching them, you had to put money in the hat. So never mind showing up with an easel and doing a painting of them, right? So we were all on the one. I'd sell a painting right there, and I'd drop a bunch of money in the hat, and it was a really special time. It was really hard work, though. That's for sure. Those guys out there are really doing it. I have a lot of respect for the Jackson Square artists. You know, I kind of rambled there. Sorry. There's just so many memories.
No.
Everything weaves in and out. It's I really don't think of my past that much. You know, I just trying to get through the day for the most part. You know.
Totally. I can respect that, and I want to say there's no rambling here. Like, this is what this podcast is about. And honestly, right. I mean, we say rest in peace to a number of people in these stories and in these reflections. And that's a real motivator for me to do stuff like this, because I want to get the stories down in the voices of those who lived it, you know, whether who knows what happens. And this is art and history and culture. And that's my calling. So I want you to feel fully liberated to reflect in as long as deep as you need. And I know that sometimes it touches on things that are difficult. Like the person who introduced me to you and your art, I grew up with this fella named Andrew Laganella, Lag. He was from Jersey and he moved to New Orleans in the early 2000s. And, you know, he was friendly with Jacques, Tony and Jacques, the brothers. And I spent some time with them. Actually, there's a framed photograph that I stared at many nights at Andrew's of you and Jacques and Lag and Bob Weir.
Bro, you gotta send me that in the back of Giacomo's.
I
remember taking that picture.
I just because Lag had it.
Rat Dog. Yeah, I used to paint Rat Dog all the time.
So anyway, that's how long I've been down. And I know both of those guys aren't with us anymore. And so I'm connected to you kind of through them, especially through Lag. Lag also introduced me to Brandon Terracone, Brotherhood of Groove. So I have a Frenchy, like a poster of the Brotherhood of Groove.
City Stages.
Right.
Alabama.
Still have it at my mom's crib. And I actually was just given an amazing gift for our wedding. We were given your painting of lettuce at Tipitina's last November. That was a wedding gift from some dear friends who live in your neighborhood.
Awesome.
So yeah, I was going to pull it off the wall and show you. Maybe I'll do it later. But so I'm just saying that's kind of the bookends here, is like meeting Lag and Brandon and coming to Jazz Fest 2000 and getting introduced to y'all. I've been following you and coming to New Orleans ever since them and then. So when I say it's an honor and a privilege to talk to you, and when we reflect on people that
Feel that.
Here, I'm with you, man. I'm with you, man. And I'm grateful.
Man, Jacques, man, he would come and dance by me, bro. It was always like, because I'd be like, man, I hope Jacques comes over by me and dances, because it was the energy and the love he put out when I love being in the middle of the crowd, painting with my eyes shut, surrounded by everybody else. They're basically doing the same thing. It's just their form of art is dancing. And it's just like, you know, well, I don't have to tell you, you know, or anybody that's probably listening to this, but the energy that is conjured up at live music events is really special. I call it magic music medicine, you know, and that's what we specialize in here, you know, in New Orleans. It's not really about fame or money. It's all about a feeling, you know. But to circle back to Royal Street,
Cool.
That shit was off the hook, man. We had so much fun. And I used to have John Sinclair would come in and do this spoken word like 2-3 times a week. Because if somebody would cancel, I called John. He lived right on Rampart Street. Or I'd call 12. He lived right down the road. He lived a few blocks down on Royal. And we definitely used to have a lot of fun, man. And I really had the time of my life hanging out with Sinclair and 12. You know, we've been to Amsterdam. We've done all kinds of crazy things together. Stuff I can't really divulge, but maximum respect. But yeah, that was a great time. Royal Street was intense. But I after a while, it was like, you know, I had to make $20,000 a month to make rent and pay my bills and pay my staff. And it was just like, man, you know, but we were doing it. You know, we were definitely doing it, but it was a lot of work. And I really, since then, I downsized. You know, I only had one other gallery that was kind of high end, which was on Toulouse Street. And I did that for a couple of years, but I enjoy the vibe down here on Oak Street, you know. French Quarter, you know, the older you get, the harder it is to stay down there for a long time, you know. And now I've been sober for 2+ years, and that's another, you know, whole nother aspect of things, you know.
No doubt. I definitely want to get to that stuff too, because that's an important part of your journey, and also kind of what drew me to want to speak with you, to think that you might be in a reflective space nowadays. But you mentioned about Jacques and really the dancing and the exchange between like the musical magic and the people moving and you interpreting that by rendering the art. Can you take us, because, you know, I don't want to gas your head up, but I'm sure you've been told 1,000 times that you're kind of like a progenitor and a pioneer with regards to live painting in the music, with the music, and so much from like Out Here at Burning Man to Scramble Campbell or John Bucati, whatever. There are so many tentacles of what you were really among the first, if not the first, to make that an essential part of the experience. Now, Brandon tells me he thinks it was Henley Douglas and the Heavy Metal Horns that was the first band you painted. Take
That
me back
is.
to the genesis, like you figuring this the fuck out, and then it
Wow.
exploding.
Shit. All right, well, Hurricane Andrew. I go down there to do. I grew up roofing up in Lowell, Massachusetts. I'm a son of a boxer. Who's a son of a boxer. My whole family are boxers. I grew up with Mickey Ward, you know, the movie The Fighter. And his mother used to babysit me, and you know, George's dad and my dad, they grew up together. But anyways, so Hurricane Andrew happens, and I go with my brother Ronnie down to Miami, and we're doing flat tile and Spanish barrel roofs because I grew up doing slate roofing, so I knew how to work the tiles. And Ronnie was the salesman, and he just dropped me off. I had my Walkman and my dugout and all the gear, and I would go, and we were fixing valleys. And anyways, you know, so at the end of the week, you know, I got all the cash that we made. We were making pretty good cash. We go to the Florida Mall. That mall shaped like an alligator, right? We go to the Florida Mall, and I go to the bookstore. And this is before the internet and all that shit. I go to the bookstore, and I like to go to the bookstore and look at all the black and white photographs, especially the nudes. Since I was like 19, 20. No, I was 21. And anyways, I come across this Herman Leonard book, man. And Herman Leonard, for those that don't know, he was the dude, the Jewish kid that lived in Hoboken during the 40s and 50s that was going into Harlem and shot all the Duke and Dexter and Max Rowe, all the legends, man. So, and I didn't know anything about jazz yet. So anyways, I find this book and I open it up, and the first page, it's Dexter Gordon. And he's got like a cigarette down, and he's looking off to the side. And I looked, and I saw in his eyes the same look that I would see in the eyes of all the boxers I grew up with right before they took the ring. It's the same fucking look, man. I was like, what? And I fucking flipped to the next page. Sure enough, I'm like, look at these motherfuckers. And I'm like, look, they're not having to fight anybody. They're gonna get on and play some horns, man. I'm like, I'm gonna learn more about jazz and what's up with New Orleans and all this shit, right? And really didn't know much about all that. Fast forward, so I ended up painting paintings from the Herman Leonard books. Like I painted that Dexter Gordon. I painted a bunch of his photographs, and I was just starting really to paint. I grew up very poor, and I always had the ability to draw. You know, just could do it. That's what I did. You know, it was my icebreaker. But anyways, so once I started painting, it came natural. But I'm ripping these pages out. I'm painting them. We get done working. I go back to Orlando, and I'm a waiter at the Hard Rock Cafe at Universal Studios, the old one, shaped like a guitar, right? And I finally get this job waiting tables that you actually made money at, because all I wanted to do was work like 4 days a week and paint all the rest of my time. I was like totally possessed by painting. And so I finally scored this great job, and I got my waiter book, and in my waiter book I got pictures of my paintings. But I had this gig where I would take balloons, a white balloon, to any kid that was under 8, and I'd freaking bring the balloon to them, and I had a Sharpie, and I'd be like, hey kid, what's your favorite Disney character, right? Because we're in Orlando. And I had like 30 of them memorized. And a kid would be like, Princess Jasmine. And I'd be like, oh yeah, watch this. And I'm like, and then show them a couple drawing marks. Kids like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden they'd be like, holy shit, wow, mister. And I'm like, that's right, kid, here you go. Bam. And it was the best feeling in the world, man. Like, I miss those days. It really, and that was before I started painting live. You dig? So, of course, you're working at the Hard Rock, and all the waiters and busters and cooks, they're all musicians, man. right? So fucking we end up, these guys are all like looking at my paintings of all these jazz musicians. My name's Frenchy, and they're like, bro, you need to move to New Orleans. And I'm like, I've never been in New Orleans. And like, look, you just need to fucking quit this job and move your ass to New Orleans. I'm like, I'm not quitting this job. I'm finally paying rent, for crying out loud, you know, and pay. And so anyways, I this restaurant opened up on International Drive called Cafe 22 Tango. They had one there. They had one in Coconut Grove and one in Atlanta, in Buckhead. And they would have like 30 to 40 artists on this roster. And each artist had a piece of the wall where they could hang like 4 or 5 paintings. And throughout the restaurant, they had like 4 or 5 different artist stations. And people would come and eat, and there'd be all these artists painting in their little, you know, little mock-up studio. It was a brilliant idea. It was genius. And you know, I had a bartender friend of mine. She was like, it was funny because she was French. Her name was Nadine. I thought she hated me because my nickname was Frenchy. I don't fucking speak French, and like Parisian French have a hard time with that. I'm like, I don't know what to fucking tell you, man. It's just a nickname. You know, I got the nickname Frenchy because there was 4 other Randys working at TGI Fridays. So they were like, well, I'm gonna have to call you Frenchy. I'm like, all right.
Everybody always wanted to know. Like, that's a big what the hell. So that's Frenchy.
First of all, I'm a waiter at TGI Fridays. Nobody would hire me, right? So Fridays finally hired me. I'm like, yes. And then so that was the upgrade. Fridays to the Hard Rock. Like, it was night and day, man. Anyway, so I've left that restaurant, and she came to the Hard Rock. She's like, Richie, you got to check out this new restaurant. You're gonna love it. I'm like, you don't hate me? She's like, oh man, you're cool, but you need to go check out this restaurant and see if you can be a part of that scene. And I was like, all right. And I don't really get nervous. And I remember having butterflies that day, and I went there, and they said, yeah, man, you can fucking be one of the artists on the crew. And I started painting live. And what was funny is my right leg would shake, would tap. You know how you fucking do that when you get all anxious while I'm painting? Well, I could be standing, I could be sitting, and my freaking leg would be jamming out. And I don't remember. It probably was like 30 shifts in that I finally noticed my leg wasn't shaking anymore. And I was like, right on. And then I started having some of my musician friends. This one bass player, Fly, he would come, and I talked to the managers because they played salsa. And I'm like, this is fucking driving me nuts, man. It's the same song over and over again. Especially I was just now getting into jam bands and starting to get into jazz. So I was like, finally stopped listening to 1988 rock, you know, Tesla and fucking.
I love Tesla.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But that was like the only shit I listened to, though. I grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, right? So like, you know, I had a mullet, the whole 9 yards before I moved down to Florida and shit. But anyways, circle back to Cafe Tutu Tango, and my boy. So I got my manager to say, I asked him if I could have him come in and just play bass and sing, and he did. He agreed. He said, all right, you know, you can do that. We did it one night. And they turned the salsa off, and my boy fucking did some live music. And then I was like watching him, and I'm like, huh. So I painted him, you know. So I painted him real fast. And then like as soon as I did that, I'm like, I gotta do that again. So I was like a week later, I'm at the old Orlando, the downtown Orange Ave used to be popping. They used to have the Sapphire Supper Club, the Blue Room, Skinny Dicks, all these bars. They had live music, right? But Sapphire Supper Club, that was the venue that had the big bands, the bigger bands, right? That was like the Tipitinas for Orlando. And I'm next door at this bar having a Franzi, and the owner Shani comes in, and she's like, Frenchy, you got to go check out this band that's playing next door. I think you're gonna love them. Right. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And she's like, well, the name of the band's Heavy Metal Horns, and they're from Boston, and they all talk like you. And I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm going over there right now. And I go over there, meet the guys. We hit it off like big time. And I come back later that night, and I was painting in oil at the time. So I show up with all my oil paints, and I did the Heavy Metal Horns painting right there. So that was my first band, but my first the first musician I ever painted was my buddy Steve the Fly. And then right after that gig, I ended up painting Chuck Mangione, right? And then and then at the Hard Rock, we're at shift meeting, and they're like, "Yeah, Charles Barkley's coming in, and we're closing a restaurant down. I'm going to do a big fundraiser golf pairing party for the Charles Barkley Foundation. Anybody want to work it?" And I'm like, what? Yeah, new guy. What's up? I go, well, I was thinking maybe I could come in and do a painting of like some basketball players and, put it in a silent auction and give the money to the foundation. And they're like, huh, sure, why not? So I show up with like a 7-foot canvas and all these oil paints, and I was not invited back, put it that way. But I made this big ass painting. Charles Barkley signed it. David Robinson, it was of the Dream Team. Coach Chuck Daly, and it was just far out. And that was my third live painting, and the rest is history. Really, that was it. I was painting like every night I could, So, and what's crazy is that I painted all like from photographs and like try to make it realism as much as I could until I found that painting the live music, man. And then it was all like this whole nother, just this whole nother flow in this, the colors, the looseness, just all of it, man. It was just right away, and it was like, it's not like you see the energy, but you feel it. And somehow your feeling translates to the color choices. It's crazy. But you can only, that only happens when you're like in the pocket, when you could when everything kind of slows down and you just let go and just let go. And you're just, whew. I don't ski, but I can only imagine that's what it's like when you're hauling ass down a mountain, in total powder, or I've surfed. So to me, it's kind of like riding a perfect wave, and just being connected to the, I call the quantum entanglement, all the atoms and molecules. So I moved to New Orleans, right?
What year are we in the move to New Orleans?
1995.
Cool.
96. And then, so I'm saving up my money because so basically, I take a leave of absence from the Hard Rock because I figured out a way I could paint full time and pay my rent and not have to do any work except bring my dugout and my headphones and some paint. And I figured there's a sports franchise, these sports bars called the Ale Houses, and they're all over Florida. And I met the owner one day, and I was like, I'd love to come out and paint, like for basketball season, paint Shaq and 3D and all those guys, because was the team back then for the Magic. And I'm like, during football, I could do football players and blah blah blah. And $400 a store and a bar and food tab and hotel room, and I'll get on the road and go paint all your stores. He was like, sure. And I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. So I was making $400 a day, dude. And I was like, this is like rich, right? Back then. So I did that, saved up enough money. Well, it wasn't enough money, but I was like, because I'm already set. I'm like, I'm gonna move to fucking New Orleans, right? But I knew nobody here, and one of the bartenders from the Hard Rock got a job at the House of Blues because he's waiting for a bartender job at the Hard Rock and or the House of Blues in like South Carolina somewhere. And anyways, I move in with him. But it was just as Mardi Gras was starting. And I moved in because the Patriots were playing the Green Bay Packers, man. And fucking I was like, I'm gonna go to the Super Bowl. I'm gonna go to the pep rally. And I'm gonna ask Mr. Kraft if I could paint the game from his suite, right? This is how I'm thinking. And I went to the pep rally. Well, anyway, so I'm like, all right, but I didn't have really enough money, but the Super Bowl was, so I was like, fuck it, I'm going, right? And I had a Chevy S10 Blazer, and the tranny kept catching on fire. But I bought it from this mom and pop place. So to catch on fire, and I bring it back, and I'd be like, I'm gonna fix it right up, Frenchy. Just keep making your payments and get it right back to you. I'm like, all right. So like I had no other choice. So I had this, but I couldn't drive it to New Orleans. So I had to get a fucking rider truck. And the only rider truck was like a 30-foot rider truck. I had to get a rider truck with a dolly so I could tow my S10 Blazer. So I got like 2 cardboard boxes and like 15 paintings and a 30-foot rider truck with my freaking shitty car attached to the dolly. And I went straight to New Orleans, man. I got here to like 2 days before the Super Bowl, meet up with my boys. And what was cool is the guys from the Hard Rock, they would take ships in New Orleans. You dig? And that's how they knew. That's why, because they were like, man, you got to move to New Orleans because we go to New Orleans every year for Mardi Gras, blow all our money, pick up ships, and drive back to Orlando, right? And so these guys were working at the Hard Rock. I had just painted G Love at Sapphire Supper Club like the week before I headed to New Orleans, and he was playing in the parking lot over by the river. And so I already had a gig set up, right?
Like chewing gum with your headphones on, drinking lemonade, chilling on the front porch after running ball like you lost a $20 bill and you got a free ticket, yo, from the scratch and win a swimsuit issue. Yeah, girl, I think I need a tissue. Like you and your baby got nasty, cut off and left all alone, making eyes on the city bus again. Like grandma cooks a blueberry pie, and little sister got a boyfriend. Yeah. It's like smoking the ride when the final ride blues.
And I also knew I did know one other person, Mike Roche, who was the general manager for the House of Blues, and I met him when I was in Atlanta that summer in '96 for the Olympics. And I was painting bands and stuff. So I go to Atlanta. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna paint on people's windows like the ale house. Everybody said no. Everybody said no, man. I'm like, but it's culture. It's a fucking country, man. I'm gonna represent. They're like, get out of here, kid. I finally got a fucking gig. I had enough gas to get to this one. It was the beer mug on fucking Peachtree. And they had these awesome windows. It was right before the 4th of July, and they do the Peachtree Road Race, right? And I'm like, I go there the day before, and I'm like, look, dude, I'll paint your windows. Well, first I walk in, and the lady's like coughing. She's like, what do you want, honey? And I'm like, I need to talk to the owner. She goes, no, you don't want to talk to the owner. He's an asshole. And I'm like, I need to talk to the fucking owner. She's like, all right. Okay, I'll get him. So he comes out. And I'm like, look, man, this is the deal. I'll paint your window. I'll come in here at fucking 3 a.m, start setting up. So when the people gathering for the road race, for the marathon, I'll be out front. I already have a couple windows done, and I'll bring people be attracted to it, and we'll pull them off the route, and they'll come buy beer, and it's only $400. And he's like, hey, get this kid $400 out of the draw to that same lady, right? And I'm like, yeah, motherfucker. And like, dude, you don't even know. So I go, first thing I go is to, like, straight to Denny's, buy like 3 meals, puke it all up later outside my half a pop-up trailer that somebody let me put in their yard in the middle of summer in fucking Atlanta. Had a shit in the woods, just hoping it wasn't poison ivy I was wiping my ass with, you know what I'm saying? Shit was real. Anyways, I made it. I went back the next day. I did the thing, and then I had that little bit of money. And the next place I went to, and now I have my one customer. I can show him pictures, and I ended up fucking scoring all the Publixes and a couple car dealerships, and ended up meeting these vendors, and we had a booth set up. And I invited Scramble up. Scramble and I painted on top of the roof of the booth during body painted these girls up there, and we actually, him and I, we were there when the bomb went off. Man, we were literally a block and a half away.
Wow.
It was anyways, but yeah, we still had an amazing experience besides that crazy shit. But so I ended up painting a band at the Tabernacle, and that's how I met Mike Grosjean. And he's like, "Hey kid, you ever make it to New Orleans? You can come paint at my club anytime." And I didn't know what the House of Blues was. I only knew the Hard Rock. And I'm like, "Okay, guy." So I show up, and I get down. So I stop my truck, the Ryder truck with the dolly, and it's 9:30 a.m. January 25th, 9:30 a.m. is when I stopped the vehicle and I arrived into New Orleans, precisely. And so me and my boys, we jump in, we go down to the quarter, and I find out where they're doing the pep rally for the Pats, because I'm gonna go fucking ask Mr. Kraft, right? So it's like big security guys. I'm like, hey, I need to talk to Mr. Kraft. They're like, "Get the fuck out of here, kid." I'm like, no, you don't understand. I need to talk to him, man. The guy just looked at me and he's like, "You better get the fuck out of here before I break your fucking neck right fucking now." And I was like, wow, well, that's not gonna happen. I knew better. I was like, okay, I think I crossed the line with this guy. And so that was the first disappointment. And so I paint G Love that night in the parking lot. And we're backstage, and everybody's trying to give G a nugget to go roll up, right? And I got I'm calling it Crippy weed because I'm still Orlando brain, right? Look, I got the Crippies, man.
I remember.
And he's like,
Yep.
he looks at me, he grabs his other dude's bud, and he's like, "Frenchy, you got to grow with the know it, baby," and walks away. And all the fucking local guys are like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Oh, fuck, man." And I could have been more of a Toron. I had like a velvet hat and a fucking yard around my neck, beer yards, whatever. I was so tourist out. And so I'm like, I put one and one together, and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, you live here?" That's suffice to say, a month later, I was blindfolded and painted that dude's grow room.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I live out here in Ganja country. I get that totally.
Very, very good friends. Yeah, I've been blindfolded a few times, brought some grow rooms.
Wow. Can you give us like a quickie story like that?
Yeah. Cannabis Cup, Pax House. I'm painting. Well, first we're looking around, trying to figure out which plants we're gonna paint. Me and my boy, and so we settle on the Sensi Star from this company, Paradise Seeds. Paradise Seeds, man. They had the Sensi Star straight. So this guy, what was his name? Luke. He was like total Dutch, 6'6", and he's like, "Frenchy, you are the American Van Gogh. We love it. We love it." And they bought, back then it was the Gilder, and they bought the painting. And then they're like, "Please come back to our booth. Only our booth. Fuck everybody else. We want exclusive." And I'm like, "Well, weed and Gilders will get you exclusivity." And so by the third night, they were like, "Okay, man, this is the deal. We're going to blindfold you and bring you to our illegal grow room in downtown. And I'm like, okay. So it wasn't until I'm like in the car and I realized I'm in Europe, blindfolded in the back of a fucking car. What am I doing? Anyways, I get to this spot and it's like this long. In Europe, they have those long apartment buildings, right? And they stretch for like city blocks. And we go up in the one, and they bring me up in the attic, and they have the whole fucking attic in this place, like above all these other people's apartments. And it was like, a huge operation. And I go up there, and my easel's there. There's a couple of joints rolled. There's some reggae playing on a boombox. A bottle of wine, a cooler full of beer. I'm like, fucking, this is awesome. And that was a pretty cool experience. Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah, sure.
Tell me about it. That's incredible. Thank you. Because I would have never guessed of all the stuff that, and like I said, I moved out here to work on the weed farms. It's kind of how like I turned my life around when I used to be really fucked up and strung out. And I sort of flew out here and landed on the farm, and talk about shitting in the woods, doing all that. But yeah, just the wild, wild west of ganja, or in that case, that was, Cannabis Cup, when shit was still hella illegal around here.
Super illegal to grow weed in Amsterdam,
right?
Or in
anywhere really.
Yeah, Spain. Yeah. They had to grow it in Spain.
Wow,
but I can't say much more.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. But thank you for taking us through that, man. I just really think that it's remarkable just to see how things have changed on so many levels, and that you were there at the genesis of a lot of it. And you mentioned about like getting, it's funny when you tell the stories, when you're talking about the Patriots or Mickey Ward, you're the Lowell Frenchy voice. And
yeah.
And then when you get down south and start talking about New Orleans, a little more of a local flavor to your storytelling. So even that you can hear the journey in the accent evolution. I love it. And I think your regular speaking voice is like the midpoint between the two,
Yeah, it depends. Yeah. It does its own thing.
Yeah. It's unique to you, and just like your art and your personality and all of it. It's a par for the course. I love it.
Like, Moo, where'd you park the car? Yeah, you're right.
My man. You mentioned when you got to town that, people, took you in and showed you the ropes. And like, I know being an outsider and coming to a place like New Orleans, it's not easy to earn trust or get welcomed into the bosom of a community and a culture. So, and you've been around for so long, you have so many relationships, it might be hard to ask. But you mentioned Derek Smoker, who's also somebody like, who was very kind to me and brought me into places.
Nice shirt.
Relationship. Thank you. Yeah, got to represent. And I love Derek. He's been on the pod, and when the pandemic was going on, he moved out to Cali for a while. We spent a lot of time together. He's a great dude. So shout out to Derek. I was curious for your journey and your experience in the past quarter century in New Orleans. So what are the musical relationships really that have defined your time, like painting them, or personally, or you as a fan, or really all the above? I'm not asking you to play favorites, so just whatever comes to mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all of it. I have been blessed to form bonds and relationships over the years, with just about everybody. I'm, very centered at the Maple Leaf and Tips, and that's where I do the majority of my painting. So, early on, Rebirth, Phil Frazier, Keith, they looked out for me. Phil was definitely has vouched for me. I think I might have more George Porter Jr. paintings now than Rebirths, because Rebirth doesn't do the Maple Leaf anymore. So, like George, of course, and Ivan and Anders, and what's funny is, those three guys, they're all sober. I remember when I first moved to New Orleans, everybody was like, I'm like watching George going, what the fuck is this? Like, oh my God. And they're like, yeah, Andy's sober. And I'm like, what? No way. You can't do that sober. And they're like, oh man, he's been sober a long time. I'm like, fuck me. And and then you go see Ivan, and they're like, yeah, he's sober too. And I'm like, what? You know? And Anders wasn't when I met Anders. We used to party back to the day. And but Anders is a big influence and mentor to me now.
Brother burning, burning on the inside. Burning, burning on the inside. Burning, burning on the inside. Burning, burning on the inside.
Early on, it was, that, the more than 40-ounce Federation. Oh boy. Yeah. Frenchy's got bald head. That's my song. And I mean, we go way back, like me and those guys. I mean, Scully and I were friends when Scully, was a waiter at Commander's Palace, writing songs. I was there when he had his first open mic at the old Hallowell, where the Republic is now, and was fucked up because, and I didn't have paint or anything. I had color pencils, and I did a color pencil sketch of Scully's first show, in New Orleans. And then we're all partying afterwards. And then we go to leave. Someone fucking stole Scully's only guitar. That was his welcome to New Orleans. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, if you choose to live in New Orleans, she's going to take before she gives. And you just got to hang in there, because if you're meant to be here, you'll be here, but it doesn't work out for everybody. Back in the day, it was like Astral Project, Charlie Denard, Rick Rose, and those guys. Fucking always, Johnny V was always there. The Wild Magnolias, that's some of my, I mean, just what the fuck, right? Like, woo, just insane, And now in New Orleans, you got like Tribal Gold. You got Juan Pardo, you got Chawa, you got the Rumble. You got all these fucking awesome Mardi Gras Indian bands, man. It's like heaven when it comes to that. Same with the brass, all the new brass bands, TBC, New Breed. These guys, it's awesome. It's that's the thing. New Orleans, it's just always keeps putting it out. It's a big. The community is very involved with that. 12, James Andrews is very involved with that as well. And Shorty. It's pretty awesome, man. But, but it's, it's, New Orleans is a tough city, but you got all that beauty and then you got all the darkness too. I wish we could bring everybody up, but it's just not happening at the moment. Just got to double down on our own little energy pods that we have, and hopefully that, it does radiate out, and that's where it starts, family first, man. But yeah, I mean, Alan Toussaint, I mean, come on. So I got a pretty good story. So I'm like 2 or 3 months in New Orleans, and my buddy Mike Dillon, not the actor, he had a band, and in his band he had Earl Turpin, Willie T's brother, Earl, and on saxophone, Walter Payton on bass, Nicholas Payton's dad, and Irvin Mayfield was playing piano. He was like 19, and we're at the Funky Bud, and I paid the gig, and Scully was with me. And I paid the gig, and after the gig, Earl comes walking up to me, him and Walter. And Earl had like this African gold robe on, you know, and they come walking up to me, and I'm like trying to break down my gear, and they're like, boy, I'm like, oh shit. Cause I mean, I got a lot of shit when I first started painting. I got, you know. Anyway, so he's like, what? I'm like, oh shit. And he's like, you know what you're doing? And I'm like, I look at Scully. I'm like, oh, I'm painting the show, you know? And he's like, ha. And he elbows Walter, and he goes, he's doing it, and he don't even know he's doing it. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? He goes, boy, you're doing acousti-optics. And I'm like, what? Fuck did you just say? And he's like, acousti-optics. And I'm like, right away it made sense to me. I'm like, acousti-optics. My head went bam. And he goes, boy, that's the relationship between sound waves and color waves and how they come through your brain and out your soul. And I was like, ma. I was like, my life has changed forever. You know, I was like, I finally know what I've been doing for the last couple of years because I felt it. I just didn't know, right? So yeah, that's so hashtag acousti-optics. That's my hashtag. You know, I'm not saying this any of my passwords. If it is, I'm changing them today. But yeah, that's a good word. So yeah, that happened. And there was one other time when I first started painting. I was at Donna's, and at the end of the show, the old man comes up to me. He goes, "All right, boy, see that man over there?" And I'm like, "Mm-hmm." He's like, "He ain't purple. He's black. See that? I'm not green. I'm black too, boy. You better get your shit right." And I'm like, "Oh fuck!" And I was like, ever since then, I'm straight on. I try to get the skin tones right. Because back in the day, I'd make people the aura, the energy, the translation of the music, the acousti-optics, which I didn't know was happening. I would go into the skin tones, right? So then what happened with that bit of advice from an elder, I blew out those vibrations away, coming out of the musicians instead of in them. So I just nailed down the skin tones, and then I'd use that color, and that'd be like the acousti-optics, or the the energy coming out of each musician, and that's where you'll always see like the little different colors around different guys, and I don't think about that shit when I'm doing it. Well, after, when I look at it in hindsight, I'm like, okay, all right. So I can kind of feel what part of the set I was working on. I can kind of trace it back to that.
That is fucking deep. I mean, from Earl and did I get it right? Acousti-optics?
Acousti-optics.
Yep. Acousti-optics. Yeah, and just the way you delivered it, like the way you like embodied his delivering it to you, and you're mind blowing. I mean, really, for somebody to put a label on this thing that has taken over your whole being and say that's what you're doing. Well, you don't even know what you're doing, but you're doing. It's gotta have been like one of those like snap a synapse moments where your brain just.
And just when you don't think it could get any crazier, fast forward a few years after that, I get done painting a Walter Wolfman's. No, I forget what his show was, but Eric Traub was sitting at the bar, and he was saxophone player for Dr. John, right? And he comes in, very serious dude, and he's like, in a deep voice, and brother, come here, get a piece of paper, pen. I'm like, oh shit, there's got to be something going down. He wants me to write it down. I'm like, this is awesome. He's like, first he's talking to me, and rest in peace, by the way, Eric Traub. So he comes up, he goes, write this word down, acousto-optics. And I'm like, I ain't saying nothing. And he's like, so back in the turn of the century in Russia, the Tsar, those guys were just fucking going off, just making art, making music, and doing all kinds of crazy shit and experimenting. And he goes, there was these conductors, and they experimented with pairing up sound, and light and color. And he goes, this one conductor actually built a fucking music room with a glass ceiling, a stained glass ceiling. And they had tarps over the fucking ceiling, and they wait for the weather to be right. And then they have these huge orchestra concerts in the fucking in the building. And during certain sections, they'd pull back the tarps, and green would go shooting through into the crowd from the ceiling. And then they cover that, and then open up the red, and cover that, and open up the yellow. And that was the first fucking light show, live concert light show, right? So I had to go. I actually went to the library over here on Carrollton to look it up, because the Google machine wasn't quite ready back then. And yeah, it was pretty fascinating. And then so Earl, of course, Earl's interpretation it's closer to my heart than Eric, but it was the same premise, and that's where I guess where Earl heard it. But then the way we translate it is a soulful thing, for sure. But that was So if you look at it, you can look at acousti-optics. But I go with acousti-optics, but it's a real thing, man. The Russians were doing it.
I love that, especially the dual messenger, because it sounds like Earl was coming from a Sun Ra perspective or something.
Yes.
And then Eric Traub is coming from more of the historical etymology.
Yeah.
The proper traditional
It's like Kermit Ruffins or Witten.
Right. Touche.
Yeah, man.
When I die, you better second line. When I die, you better monkey shine. You better put my coffin on top of the bar. Put the jukebox on a closer walk. When I die, oh Lord, you better second line.
I was always wondering, and I know a lot of people wondered, I didn't realize the sport. I mean, obviously, I grew up going to Eagles games with my dad in Philly, and I'm staring at a rendering of the Eagles right in front of me to my left here. So football is a big part of my childhood and my life, and my dad passed on, and my NFL fandom is kind of tied to our memories and such. So when you started getting involved with the Saints and ESPN, I know you're a Pats guy, and you've already described you were originally a Pats guy.
You're right. Yeah.
So, and you described how you came down and tried to get with Mr. Kraft. And I remember that Super Bowl. That was Drew Bledsoe, Brett Favre, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
36 Bowl. So, yeah, I just wanted you to maybe, just like you did with the music, tell me about getting welcomed into the world of the NFL and the Saints and actually being an ambassador for the city's football team, which is an honor, maybe even bigger than any of the music stuff.
Definitely more
exposure. I guess more exposure.
Way more exposure. Yeah,
that's I misspoke. More exposure.
Yeah. Well, but when I just opened up that gallery, it was right after 9/11 and all that, and they started having the games again. I painted a fundraiser for breast cancer at the Ritz, and there was no local talent. Everybody was on the road doing Katrina fundraisers or 9/11 fundraisers. They hired up all these, everybody was traveling doing the 9/11 fundraisers. And so they only had the Marine Color Guard as entertainment for this fundraiser, and I was hired to do a painting of the fundraiser. And normally that's I paint a band, right? And then I'm oh, fuck. I'm all right, well, I'll paint the color guard, right? So I lay out the color guard on this canvas, and then they go do the live auction thing, and a couple of people bid, and then finally this one guy stands up and bids. It's Tom Benson, and it's his freaking party, and everybody sits down. So I'm what, dude? With my boy, I'm dude, Tom Benson just bought the band. That's awesome. So a couple of days later, I'm my boy's getting ready to go to the Saints facility and deliver the painting for him, right? And I'm all right, look, dude, man, you got to ask him if I can paint on the sidelines, bro. And he's sure, man, I'll ask. So he comes back. He's like, dude, we got to go down the hall. Mr. Benson wants to meet you. He's totally set, man. He thinks it's a great idea. And I'm like, what? And so fast forward, I signed a contract, and I started painting all the home games that season on the sidelines. Painted every home game, and it was just it's crazy. It's only magic when you don't know you're in it. You know what I mean? Like I had no idea. I was just trying to get there on time, man. Sunday morning at noon. Are you kidding me? That's kickoff. No, I missed probably 99% of the kickoffs. I never made. I was like, oh, there's only one 12 o'clock on Sunday, and it's at night. Like I don't know what this 12 a.m. on Sunday thing is, but it was it was awesome. It was frightening. When you have sometimes you make a shitty painting, and there's 70,000 people watching you make a shitty painting. It's not cool, man. But those first couple of years were tough because our team sucked really bad. Jim Hazard was coach, and like it was Dickett, and then
like Aaron Brooks era.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, totally. And we just what was hard about it was the first half was always fun, but then we'd be down by 20 points and everybody would leave. So I'm sitting there painting on the sidelines, getting heckled in the Superdome on my home turf, dude. I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. How many times are people going to call me Picasso? I'm like, this is not cool. Especially the Philly people. Wow, I'll tell you, Philly, man.
I'm sorry.
It's the only other city that gives New Orleans a run for the money for the tailgate. Because I've been all of them for Monday night, dude. Philly's fucking hardcore, and you can get a cheesesteak too across the street. That doesn't suck.
Tony Luke's. Yep, Tony Luke's right across the street.
Yeah, and that weird strip mall thing.
Yep.
Yeah, dude. I got two. I almost fucking missed the gig because I fell asleep in my rental car. I was so stuffed. I ate both of those babies though. Painting on the sidelines at Saints games was really, it was a very challenging gig, but I did 8 years. The thing with the sideline paintings, so I'm painting on the sidelines, and Greg Bensel, who does community and media outreach and marketing, he takes care of like all the celebrities and takes care of the player. He's a great guy. Anyways, Greg told Jay Rothman, back then it was Sunday night football. It wasn't Monday night football yet for ESPN. It was Sunday night. And told Jay Rothman about me. So Jay Rothman was the producer for Sunday night. So I get this phone call, and the guy's like, yeah, hey man, so I got this job. It's like in tight quarters, high energy. You can paint something like that, right? And I'm like, what do you do, man? And he's like, well, I'm the producer for Sunday Night Football. I was thinking maybe having you come into my production trailer and paint me and my director while we're calling the shots for the game. I'm like, what? I got this photo. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And he's like, well, can you do that tomorrow night? And I'm like, no. And he's like, what? And I'm like, no, man. I'm gonna be on the sidelines painting the game. We painting a win, because I always painted wins, even though we weren't winning, but I painted wins. And he was like, all right, I respect that. He goes, well, if you have time, stop by the trailer. I'd love to meet you in person. I'm like, all right. So I stopped by the trailer. Right away, we hit it off. Right away, we hit it off. This guy's great. Deadhead. Went to Boulder for broadcasting, and he called his first football game in that stadium where the Dead and Co play. Folsom.
Wow.
So the producer for Monday Night Football, ESPN, called his first game in Folsom while going to see Jerry on the Rocks when he was a college student. Damn. This guy, right? Total stud. And so I meet him. He walks me through everything. He's like, I want you to come back. And he goes, well, we need to set up a thing, when you can come paint me doing this. And I'm like, all right, man. And he goes, you know what? I got an idea. He goes, I'm going to fly you out to a couple of games and I want you to learn all the stuff behind the scenes. So when you're looking at my screens, you know whose voices are behind those cameras, the camera guys in their positions. And I just want you to know, like, the guys doing the replay and chopping up film, and all, graphics truck and special ops truck. And I'm like, awesome, right? So like, it wasn't for like another year later did I paint his production truck. And it was actually in Jacksonville. And so I mean, like, I lasted like I got cut the year right before we won the Super Bowl. But because of that, I called my buddy Jay up. I'm like, man, I got cut, man. And he's like, everybody gets cut, dude. It's football, right? And I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah. I'm like, all right. He goes, look, Frenchy, you come out to any Monday night games you want. We'll get you on the sidelines. You paint your ass off. And that's when I forged the relationship with Jay and ended up doing, I don't even know how many Monday night games. And then what I ended up doing was not only painting his truck, I painted like in Philly. I painted the graphics truck. I was inside the graphics truck during the game, painting Monday night football production behind the scenes going down. Seattle, I did Phoenix, I did the replay truck. Green Bay, I did the Spider Cam guys. It's actually the 50-yard line. And it's like all the different, so I geek out on the cameras and all the gear. I love that shit. Pittsburgh, I painted the broadcast booth. I painted broadcast booth in Foxborough. And then all the other ones were like games. The other ones were Saints playing. And I did a couple of games away at the Georgia Dome, painting the Saints this one time.
Enemy territory.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go back to painting at the Superdome when we sucked and having these hecklers, right? So by the last couple of minutes, 2-minute warning, it's just like I'm just getting swarmed by the opposing team members, right? Let's see it. I'm like, fuck you, it's a win, And they're like, well, my boy, the whistle monster, Leroy, right? Wears the big whistle on his head, Guinness Book of Records, loudest whistler. He'd come over and just like,
Who that?
And just fucking blowing with this whistle on those guys, and just everybody was, fuck you, man, that's not cool, man. And he just like, everybody was scattered. And then it would just be him and I for the last 2 minutes, right? And then we became best friends, and he's my kid's godfather now. Yeah, and so we're in Atlanta, and I didn't know he was at the game. And I found a spot to paint, and I set up my shit, and then right above my easel on the wall, Leroy sitting right there, dude. Full gear, helmet, all of it. And we're like going back and forth, high-fiving throughout. We ended up beating the Falcons. Drew Brees had a fucking record game. And Leroy and I were both featured on Sports Center as the opening video. It shows me painting and screaming defense, and then it pans up the whistle, blow this whistle, and we're just like freaking out.
Who that?
We go back to our hotel. We went back to his room. We put on ESPN. Like, I wonder if they're going to show the game, right? We put it on, and then we see us. We're like, holy shit. We were like little kids, man. It was awesome.
On Sports Center. Good guy, Frenchy. That's it. Top artist in the area here. With a little bit of an artistic New Orleans style remembrance of this record-setting night for the Saints.
That's a good memory right there. So yeah, back to Saints sucking really bad. I did all those years, and then the hurricane happened, and I was there the preseason game. They moved it up from Sunday to Friday because of the hurricane, and then for the home opener, which was that's it doesn't even all the Monday night guys, they were like, there'll never be anything that could top that. the sound of that crowd when Steve Gleason blocked that fucking punt was just it's you can't describe it. You know, it was just so much, man. It was so intense. It was amazing.
The former St. Morton Anderson is here for most field goals. Look out! Right through! A pick block by Steve Gleason. It is scooped and scored by Curtis DeLoach. Touchdown, New Orleans!
Remember, you can't line anybody up over the center. And what they do is they just create this giant gap for Gleason to go through. And he's on the kicker before he ever gets a chance to get it off. Watch how close he is to taking off his hands.
You could not script this any better than it just happened for the New Orleans Saints.
You know, that's, you know, the power of community right there, brother. Funny story. I get there super early that day. I'm super anxious. And I pull into the Superdome with all my gear. And there's nobody on the field yet. And I just start bawling. You know, I just start fucking breaking down. And I like drag my shit over to the end zone. And I'm just crying. And I hear, it's okay, French. I cried my first time back too. I'm like, oh, fuck. I turn around, it was Steve Gleason stretching out. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, Steve, because we knew Steve because he was a big music fan, and he would on Mondays, he'd go to Papa Grows Funk at the Maple Leaf and dance off his sore body. Because he wasn't the biggest guy, but he was fucking nuts, and he was always in the game. So he was like, yeah, man. You know, we were talking about how you just feel the energy was just beaming, and there was nobody even in there. It's like, oh shit, this is something special's happening right now. And sure enough, he blocked that fucking punt. And then later on that night, I finally get back to the Maple Leaf because my studio was across the street, and I'm unloading my gear, and fucking people come running in across the street, and they're like, yo, Frenchy, Steve's here, man. He's asking for you. He's out front dancing. I'm like, fuck yeah. So I fucking threw my shit down and went over there, and the whole bar was just celebrating Saints love. And that was a really special moment. Me and Steve back in the day, you know.
And I just remember that I didn't know that you had obviously had that interaction with him pregame or the celebration postgame. I think that's a microcosm of just you, the guy, the artist, the human. Like you're like, and it's like a Forrest Gump kind of thing. You're just like there.
Yeah, I sometimes get that,
and that's for a reason, man. This podcast's been amazing for a lot of levels, but a big one is just the way you move through life. You know, like a tough working class guy coming from a boxing background, you roofer, and just by happenstance, by like some creator did this, showed you something, and you followed it, and what's become of that initial muse, whether it was a scribbling, a fly, or whatever. It's so beautiful. It's such a human story, obviously not without carnage, loss, trauma, and you've referenced sobriety numerous times. And I myself, you know, I'm not abstinent, but I had a 12-year opiate addiction. We talk a lot of recovery on this pod. So as much or as little as you want to talk about, because you talked about, you know, you have a wife and you have a son, and your son's 11, but you're 2-ish years sober. So take me through whatever you're comfortable talking about, arriving at the point where you said enough, and what's your life like now?
Well, you know, I was always, my job being in the crowd like that, you know, the musicians get it bad, but at least they have the stage that separates them from the straight up party, you know. I've always kind of kept it pretty good. And then when I just got, you know, there was a lot of anxiety and stress on being able to make enough money to support a family and be a father. So I worked way too much. I overworked myself. And in the process, in order to work more, I started doing Adderalls, right? And I never was a pill guy ever. And started doing, I of course, there's always the blow and the booze and all that. But it got to a point, my wife and I started fraying a little bit, and that made me get even a little bit more darker. It was about 2 years of just darkness for me, where we weren't getting along, and then we separated, and not having my son here and all that. I just doubled down on trying to numb myself and not think about anything else, and in the process, and then the pandemic hit, and the pandemic is where I got sober, because it was to a point where nobody's checking in on you. So if you're an addict, you can do whatever the fuck you want during a pandemic. It's full on, and I got to a point where I got to just one night, I was, or morning, I was like, man, if I wake up, I'm gonna call Ivan up. And I fucking woke up and I called Ivan. And Ivan put me with a group of people right away. It was all Zoom, so Ivan and Anders, Jimmy Combe, all these guys, they're just angels. They're just, I don't know how to explain it. It's just amazing. Like, yeah, they're great artists, but what they do outside of the stage is really their best work, I think. It's really, can't say enough, and so, and then so there I am. So I always, I'd always sit in my sketchbooks and I'd write in my journals and whatever, and I'd always be like, one day, I'll be like George Porter. One day I'll be like Ivan Noah, or Anders, and be able to be sober and be at the top of my game as well, making the best art that I could possibly make. I'm certainly not there, but I have the knowledge now, and it's whether or not I put that to good use. I love my sober life. Like, I can't, man. All those vodkas and Crown Royals, man, unbelievable. And didn't need any of it. If anything, it was a barrier between what I talked about earlier and is riding that wave, to truly paddle out, ride that wave, man. There's no better connection than a sober connection. It's really it's the ultimate high. It's far out.
Feel that.
And never mind, the family, got the families all together. My son and I were never been closer, and I'm just full of gratitude for sure. Yeah, you're right.
Shows. We feel it. I hear it in your voice. I see it in your eyes when we talk. Thank you for taking it there, because I know, like, that stuff's personal. And I will tell you, you're not the first person on this podcast to say that their first call was to Ivan. He's obviously been a number of people's first calls, and he really is an angel. And a lot of guys in that town, it's remarkable to see these living legends, and I'll count you among them, man. Even if you're new to the sober club, man, you paid your dues and you came out the other side. You almost lost the most important shit, and now it's better than ever. That's why I do this pod. I think that's why I wanted to finish with the sober stuff, because it's inspiring. You lived hard and you lived to tell the tale. And you bring up surfing, man. If someone were to ask me, like, what compares to the joy I get from experiencing live music, it would be riding a wave. I did it since I was in the womb with my mom. She had me out in the ocean, and I learned to surf when I was like 5. And it's seriously the most sacred thing on earth for me. So for you to use the riding of a wave as exemplary of what you do or what you seek, when I hit here deep. So give thanks, brother, for real.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
You've been really generous with your time. I do have other questions, but maybe we'll just do it again in a year or two, see where you're down the road.
Yeah, we'll do it again, brother.
It would be an honor and a privilege, but just getting, you know, well over an hour with you and for you to be so real, so raw, so earnest, just eternal thanks and gratitude, my brother.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One other thing I forgot to mention.
Please.
Dr. John.
Go ahead.
Huge influence.
Some people ask me, like, where does that Bo Diddley thing fit into the New Orleans pattern? And it's very connected to the second line rhythms, because it is a second line rhythm in its way.
Professor Longhair. There's so many.
You can see the Dr. John in the paintings.
Yeah, Dr. John. Fucking come on now. Wow. All right, brother. You have a blessed day, man.
Same to you. Thank you for your time, and I'll be in touch.
Yeah, you're right. Who that?
So you think that it's over? Your love is gonna reach the end. Anytime you count, another day, I'll be right there for you. If you need a friend, yeah. It's gonna take a little time, I know. Time is short and makes a broken heart. Don't you even worry, pretty darling, 'cause I know you'll find love again. Yeah, love is all around you. Yeah. Love is like it, I'm trying to go, waiting for you. This is love made just for two. Keep it open heart and you'll find love again. I know.
What? You thought I wasn't gonna go Tesla with it? Come on now. Y'all don't even know me. But before I digress, I just want to say huge thanks and a deep bow to Frenchy. What an enlightening and illuminating human story, journey, fantastic voyage. Call it what you will. It was so awesome how he just hopped in the Wayback Machine and took us on a few rides. That's what this podcast is all about. I learned so much talking with this dude, of whom I've been a fan and an admirer for, 2+ decades. And can't say enough, he was just an open book. So a deep bow. And thanks for bringing up Tesla. I mean, come on. One of two bands that I still regularly return to from the glam rock hair band era, unironically. The other one obviously being Cinderella. Shout out Tom Kiefer. Please come on the pod. But that's a podcast for another time and talk for another day. We are going to just show love to the city of New Orleans and people dear to us, like I did earlier with Lag. Going to play 2 songs for the Vibe Junkie JAMZ, like we always do about this time, because love will find a way. And I'm going to start with my man Brandon Tarracone, because, Lag introduced me to Brandon. Brandon became an integral part of our crew, both at New Orleans style and on Fish Tour, and he's still a dear friend. He lives in Massachusetts, where he's from, where Frenchy's also from. They're from nearby one another. They both moved to New Orleans around the same time. Brandon has an extensive collection of Frenchy artwork. His own band was painted by Frenchy some time ago. I have a poster of that from back in the day. So I figured I'd play, you know what? Brandon Taracone's Brotherhood of Groove. I used to write about them on Jam Bass too. And Brandon's still a super homie, still making music with Crew to Groove and Skunk Sessions up there in Mass. Happily married. Lovely wife, Randy. 2 beautiful kids. So shout out, Brandon. Thank you for opening so many doors for me in New Orleans, because it really was the key to the kingdom. Everything I've done in music media and podcasting and the written word and community, everything can be traced back to New Orleans and Jazz Fest. And y'all showed me how to do it. So we're going to play Wookiee World. You're even ahead of the curve on the Wookiee thing. Because, you know, I'd Wook this or that in 2023, but let's keep it a buck. You were calling cats Wookiees in 2004. So we'll start there. Band was incredible, featuring Lettuce OG alto man Sam Kinninger on saxophone, and another saxophone player, all world, Jeffrey Watkins, who had many shows with tours with James Brown, and then later with the New Orleans Suspects. So that's where we're starting, and we're going to finish with my man Derek Smoker, Derek Freeman. You heard Frenchy reference him as a super homie, and I will co-sign that to the nth degree. After Brandon left town, I would say that Derek is probably like my tightest homie in the music community down there in New Orleans. He's been on the pod. I've written about his records. His most recent album, White Splain, was on my favorite records of 2022. And I'm going to play his soul brass band project. I was rocking the t-shirt when I was talking to Frenchy. We're going to do this like If You Want Me to Stay, Sly Stone, with a little bit of Outkast in the middle from a couple years ago on OZ. And that'll bring it on home. I want to say goodbye. Jah bless. Give thanks. And we'll see you next time. Yes, indeedy.
Floor. working out that the scene is ripe and it's time for us to play. work it out that way.